Okay, so we are going to go ahead and get started with this. Welcome. Thank you for being here. For some people, it's early. For some people, it's the middle of the day. I don't think for anybody it's late yet. I don't think certainly, unless you've been up for, 24 hours straight now, then yeah, it'd be pretty late for you. But yeah, thanks for being in. Yeah. Oh, he likes taking pictures. Yeah, make whatever weird faces you want, peace signs, all that kind of stuff. Makes a more interesting picture anyway. So this is an eSports panel. It's a little different of an eSports panel than ones I've done in the past because we're going to make a connection to eSports and its place in education, especially higher education at the college level. So on Thursday, I gave a presentation about kind of an update about where eSports is right now, where maybe it's going, especially concentrating on the Overwatch League. Talked about that a lot. And then Ross and Chris gave a great presentation yesterday on kind of event management and running esports, that kind of stuff. So this is kind of our third one. I haven't seen any other ones about esports at MAGFest yet, but I try to do these every year. It's my fourth year being here, and I've done at least one panel every year on esports because it's just a fascinating subject to me. It's something that has been around for a lot longer than 4 or 5 years that a lot of people don't realize. Got a great history yesterday, was kind of presented to us, and people don't realize that it's been around for a while. It's exploded in the last 4 or 5 years, and it's continuing to catch fire. And where is it going in the next direction? It's hard to say what is going to be successful, what is not. Are we going to see it in the Olympics? Are we going to see the Overwatch League take off as the next NFL? It's hard to say what is going to happen because if we knew, we could make a lot of money. But all we can do at this point is just guess. And so that's kind of what's been talked about before. Today, again, it's kind of its place in education. You'll see what that means here in a little while, because it's kind of exciting that as somebody that works in academia, it was, number one, it was kind of a hard sell to say, hey, I want to start teaching people about how to work in esports. I want to research esports. And the people that I'm working for, my deans and presidents, are like, what are you talking about, esports? That's not a real thing to actually research. You can't research video games. And, well, I said, look at what Dr. Kent Norman's been doing with immersion over at Maryland for a long time. And they were like, oh, well, okay, I guess you can research video games. And I made the connection to esports. So my name is Joey. I guess I should have said that at the beginning, but I didn't. There it is. I'm a associate professor at Shenandoah University, which is about an hour and a half west of here. It's a small school, small private school. I work in the business school. My degree is in sport management, which is strange to be at a video game conference to work in sport management, but the logical connection is esports. I got to do research for pretty much my whole life, and I realized I'm not a huge fan of doing research all the time, so I got to make it something I'm interested in, and I'm very interested in video games. So that was a very easy connection to me. I've been there for 6 years. Like I said, this is my 4th MAGFest. I love this conference every single year. I try to come back every single time because y'all are the best audience to present to. Going to academic conferences, yeah, it's fine, it's great, it serves its purpose. But this one is just so much easier and comfortable and interesting. Sometimes there you're talking to ones of people and they're just trying to one-up you about what your research is compared to their research. Well, here it's like we're all kind of in this together. Not to quote High School Musical, but we are kind of all in this together. I'm not going to sing. I could. It'd be bad. So that's kind of where I am. I'll let Eugene introduce himself and talk a little bit about this stuff, and we'll show our pretty pictures of ourselves, too.
So he's the academic. I'm not. I'm the high school dropout who figured out how to make a living out of doing video games. So go for that. All right. So my background is many years in video game industry, working with development companies, studios. I used to work for a studio here in Virginia called Mythic Entertainment that did a big MMO called Dark Age of Camelot you might have heard of. We got sold to EA, and I was, do you think I should back up my hard drive?
Who needs it?
I worked for EA for a number of years, and what I've been doing for the last couple of years is consulting and working a lot with esports companies and answering that question for a lot of people: what are esports and why should I care? And that's mainly companies that are either deciding whether they should sponsor it, pro teams deciding whether they should start an esports team, schools trying to decide if they should offer an esports degree. About 18 months ago, I wrote a big white paper on the kind of my take on the esports business. I'm working with a couple of other people who are from the real world of academia. I'm in the process of turning that actually into a degree college text that hopefully a number of schools will begin to use because there is such interest in actually offering degree programs in esports, not meaning the varsity side where you can now actually get sponsorships to go to school, scholarships to go to school, and play esports. You know, this is people who are saying, I want to work in esports. I'm not good enough to be a player. But there's one of the things I think we're going to talk about is all the jobs that are actually available and possible that you could get involved with. Quick show of hands, though. So who plays any of the esports? Dota, League, okay?
80%.
You all watch?
90.
Who watches?
Yeah.
All right, you're all watching. Put your hand up if you didn't put your hand up. Why are you in here? What do you need?
I used to play Counter-Strike 1.6.
Oh, you retired at your peak.
Well, yeah.
Excellent. That's good. Okay, thank you.
All right, that's good. And so, like Eugene said, he's more on the industry side. I'm on the academic side. I also work for a radio show called Press Start, and we do a podcast called The Checkpoint. If you get a chance, check us out on SoundCloud. We're on Bob Rock's radio on Saturday mornings, as well as ESPN Radio out of Hagerstown, where we talk. Yeah, shameless self-promotion there. Where we talk about video games, in particular for me, eSports. Again, I do talk about the Overwatch League a lot because that's really what I'm trying to get into. Because the way that it's modeled is
Who plays Overwatch?
Overwatchers.
Overwatch?
Yeah.
Good, about half. All the Overwatch is sitting on the left.
It's it's kind of strange. But Overwatch is in kind of an exciting time right now with what they're doing, and I'm trying to see if it's going to work. And I'm looking at the model of it because it is so close to a traditional business sports model with like the NFL, NBA, and so on and so forth. So that's where my research is. But yeah, if you get a chance, check us out on that radio show. This panel, by the way, is kind of free-flowing. Yeah, we have slides up here. We could come up here and talk for an hour and it'd be really boring. But we'd rather hear questions and comments and things from all of you because that's the best way for any of us to know stuff. Eugene and I don't know everything about esports or teaching esports and the industry. It's, like I said, we're all in this together. We're coming up with ideas because it's constantly evolving. So if you have questions throughout this talk, please raise your hand. You know, don't feel like you need to wait to the end to hold your questions or anything like that. So if you have things, please, by all means, ask questions. Maybe. Click it. Hey, there we go. We're really good at technology. So this is what we're going to talk about today. Again, this is more of a teaching esports in school and what role it can play in the future of esports. And this is not from the development side. I'm not an IT guy. I don't write any kind of code or anything for games. Eugene knows a lot more than I do about it. I work in a business school. I teach sport management. Okay, I'm talking about more how to manage and work in the esport industry and help it to make money. That's kind of where I come from. So it's about the event management, the marketing, the sponsorship, the governance structure. There is some law involved in that. I don't do law, but there's a lot of law involved in it as well. Yes?
I have a PR degree. Can you talk after this?
Absolutely.
Hell yeah.
And one caveat to that, I will talk quickly because I am driving to Georgia right after this to see the national championship. Go Dogs. Yes, but I'm happy to meet afterwards and I got my card and I'm happy to continue conversations with anybody because I just like talking about this stuff. Like I said, we're all trying to work on this together to see where we can go with this because it's an exciting time. So we'll talk about what are esports. It's been something that I've talked about a lot. I've written book chapters about it. I'm sure Eugene's going to cover that in his textbook a little bit. It's kind of a smaller conversation now than it was 4 or 5 years ago, though. Okay, because more and more people know what esports actually are and what they aren't, to be honest. We'll talk about what students need to know to work and manage the industry, where they can learn it. There are some schools offering classes in esports. There are very, very few, like 1 or 2 offering actual degrees in esports. How this can help people that want to work in the industry get a leg up, and is this real? Where can you find jobs? Are there jobs out there right now? Well, spoiler alert, yes, there are jobs out there right now where you can work in esports and not play esports. Okay, so quickly what they are. Competitive video games. People sitting around playing video games against each other, and now they're making a lot of money doing it. So esports, there are some book definitions that we saw yesterday. I don't agree with that definition, but that's fine. Everybody's got their own definition about what esports are and what they're not, and what a sport is and what a sport is not. Is esports a sport? It doesn't really matter. To me, yes, they are. I wrote a book, like I said, I wrote a book chapter saying esports are a sport. And that's coming from a sport management guy that's played sports and researched sports his whole life. That was not a real popular thing to say to a lot of traditional sport people in the industry 4 or 5 years ago. But now they're like, oh yeah, esports are a sport. I said that all along. No, you didn't say that all along. I said that. You're just saying it now because I said it so long ago.
He holds no grudge against them.
No, none at all. None at all. No, I love them all. So great. So that's what esports is by definition, is competitive video games.
I just have a quick question. Out of curiosity, what is your sort of criteria for a sport?
Okay, so I've got four things that have to be accomplished for something to be, for an activity to be a sport. It's got to be institutionalized, which means it needs a governing body setting rules, regulations, setting schedules, that kind of stuff. It's got to be competitive. There has to be a winner and a loser. Okay, and that's kind of where professional wrestling isn't an actual sport, because is it competitive? Yeah, it's winner and loser, but it's predetermined. Okay, so that's a difference there for whether or not it's an actual sport.
Shakara.
Yeah, I know. Again, spoiler alert, sorry. Shattering illusions and dreams is what I'm doing here today.
That's right.
That's great. And then there's got to be a mental component and a physical component, which has a direct impact on the outcome of that activity. The one that hangs people up on esports is the physical part. And you know, there certainly is a physical component. Actions per minute on a controller has a direct impact, or keyboard and mouse, KBAM, has a direct impact on the outcome of an esports match. And I always make the comparison to chess, or not even chess. Poker's my favorite one to make a comparison to, because poker's on ESPN, it must be a sport. No, it's actually not, because you hold your cards better than your opponent doesn't mean you're going to win that hand. There's no physical component to poker that has a direct impact on the outcome. Okay? To esports there is. And now it's competitive, it's institutionalized, there's a mental component to it. The US government says that esports is an actual sport. They're giving out sport visas for people to come to the US to play esports. So according to the US government, it's a sport. So yeah, there are a lot of broad definitions, but that's the one I use as a book definition in my classes. Personally, I also say that it can't be a judged competition, which irks a lot of people, because that way figure skating, a lot of gymnastics wouldn't qualify as a sport, because I don't like that subjective component to it. I know they knock off the highest and lowest score, I get it. But to me, it's still, that opens the door for a lot of possible bribery and other things, and subjective nature.
You see the door you opened?
I know, I'm telling you, I could talk about this. This is like a full week in my sport management classes is what is sport in my definition. But that's a great question.
The worst thing we did was call it esports. It's competitive gaming.
Yeah.
Right? Like, and does anybody here really care if it's called esports or not? No. You do. The PR guy, you're going to have to pick who you represent really carefully. So, you know, in some level, it doesn't matter, because most of the people arguing about it are actually the people who don't even understand the games half the time anyway. So it's competitive gaming, and that's what matters.
Absolutely.
It's people who, to your point, have certain skills that differentiate us. If you've actually ever tried to play any of these games with a person at the level competitively that they can play, you know the difference, right? Because they can outplay you any day of the week.
Yeah. It's like me playing basketball against LeBron James. Wouldn't be pretty.
Oh, it'd be awesome.
No, God, yeah.
I'd pay to watch that.
I don't mean to took my own horn, but basically, like, I dropped out of college to become a professional video gamer with World of Warcraft, with this guild called Blood Legion, and I spent about a year competing to be world first against this other guild called Method. And basically, there was no money in it. At the time, professional sports were basically focused on FPS and StarCraft and things
Sure.
like that. And I couldn't monetize my games, and Twitch was relatively still new, and Amazon hadn't bought it out yet, so I couldn't make wealth, and I didn't know how to do that. So basically what happens is the guild fell apart, I had to drop out, I didn't know what to do, so I kind of worked in the regular IT sector, and now I'm kind of like, I want to invest back in esports because I know it's the future, I know it's the market, like especially with Overwatch, what they're doing right now, so it is going to be the next NFL, like that's how I see it.
So the great thing is, and what we're going to go on to is what you could do,
Okay,
right?
That's my question is, how do I invest? Because I want to invest in like the CSGO team, but because I get to the point now where I don't have the time to commit. You know, when I was rating Blood Legion 18 hours a day,
Sure.
I don't have that time commitment to be a professional gamer.
Sure.
I do have that commitment to be a manager at some level, and I want to know how can I get in that game when I don't have a lot of money? Because the money is how it dictates if I can manage or not.
Yeah.
Well, we'll touch on some of that as we keep going through.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, that sounds good.
And so you can see the other things up there. It's a $1 billion industry, a lot of money there. There are professional leagues, insane rise in revenue generation. But the important point to this panel is that bottom bullet point there. As the industry continues to grow, they need people that understand, have been trained, and have studied working in esports. Okay, because running events is not easy to do. And there are some certain aspects to esports that are very different than running concerts or basketball events. There's some similarities for sure, but there's a lot of things that's very unique to running an esports event. Okay, so in these classes, like I said, this is an educational one. This is what I'm gonna focus on, and this is actually based on Eugene's white paper. And there's a lot more than just these things right here, but this is kind of a start to what people need to understand about esports to have that understanding and leg up in the industry. Number one is the history. You got to know where it came from. Okay, working in the NFL or NASCAR or anything, I tell my students, you got to understand where it came from, where it was founded, who founded it, who's worked in it, what has changed over time for the good or the bad. Because you got to understand history in order to move forward with it. Okay, or else you're doomed to repeat the bad parts of it. So you got to understand the history. It's a very, very important part. Institutional knowledge is important. Event management may be the single most important part of a class like this. My class will be Sport Management 241, Introduction to Esports. I will spend the majority of the semester going over event management and actually running an esports event. We're going to do a small one on campus so that they get the experience, because experience is extremely important. The hands-on actually doing is extremely important, way more important than just learning it in the classroom on a slide or in a textbook. There's huge value in a textbook, as Eugene can ascribe to, but that hands-on doing the experience, students get so much more out of that than anything else they learn in the classroom. So that's a very, very important part of what the class will be, is that event management. The marketing and sales, real important. There are new jobs in the industry working in the marketing side and the sales side of things, the sponsorship, the promotion side with esports. Governance is a hot topic in esports. Who's governing what? Who's running what tournaments? Are the developers doing it? Are the studios doing it? ESL, E-League, who's in charge? MLG, who's bought out by Activision Blizzard. And then the media side. How can you consume esports? How do people consume it? Do they watch it online and stream it? Do they watch it on TV? Yes to both of those. And Eugene and I were having a conversation up here earlier, right before we started, about the Overwatch League. It's not going to be on TV at this point, but it's going to be on MLG.com. It's going to be on Blizzard.
It's not on TV. Who cares that it's not on TV? That's a terrible question.
It is a weird question.
Nobody cares that it's not on TV.
I do. I'm somebody. At least my wife thinks I am.
Yeah.
We have seen some esports. Dota's been on there.
Who's watched E-League on TBS? That's astonishing. Look at that.
It's been on ESPN too.
Who's watched any esports on TV?
TV, not streaming. TV.
The thing in the corner of your living room. Okay.
Like by accident.
See, there's the
You
point.
just came across it.
The thing is, I feel like no one, within our age range, really has cable.
Right.
To watch TV, so we just watch Twitch.
There was a great headline recently that said, can TBS legitimize esports by bringing it to television? And I said, well, I suppose they could do what they did with the World Series of Poker, which peaked at about 1.25 million viewers. So and my point was, and what I wrote was, if they can lose 18 million viewers, they might be able to achieve the same results. So,
That's a good point. Yeah.
Do you find that demographically, esports viewers also coincide with cord cutters? Because
yes.
So I don't really see a need to bring it to TV.
Neither do I. He argues that. This is just a good debate.
It's not an argument.
It is. Come on. I'm making it an
small
argument.
argument.
I'm very confused.
Yeah. So
The academic wants a debate. I want an argument.
This is from a sport management side of things. Is that TV was the single biggest thing that
When he was growing up.
capitalized when I grew up. Jeez. Thanks.
I think I'm actually older than him, but it's fun.
I don't think so. I know so. So television was the single biggest thing that commercialized professional sports. It was by far the single biggest thing. And I think TV does still have a place in our society. I think for sure that streaming it is going to be the number one way to watch and consume esports. Don't get me
TV
wrong.
is where they're going to rest their laptop so they can watch it. What?
How do you rest it on a flat screen TV unless you lay it flat? I don't understand
What's
you.
a flat screen TV?
Oh gosh.
Watch Twitch on our smart
Yeah, and so
Excellent.
I think that's going to be the purpose of a TV is to watch it, stream it through that instead
Yeah.
of searching online and watching on a computer. Right.
We'll keep this going, but we'll come back to that. Keep going.
All right. It's all theoretical. That's what academia is anyway. Yes.
Good question. Do you think sports is the other reason why cable still exists?
Yes.
And Survivor
yeah.
and American Idol. Come on, those are hot. No.
I honestly think it's just the NFL.
Yeah, I mean the NFL obviously with CBS and Fox that's what's keeping it around right now.
Look, TV is built on advertising. It has to work within three days. It has to ideally work immediately. Most people who buy ads want you to go out the following day and buy a car or watch a movie, right? And who here watches much live TV anymore?
What? Really?
Right, you don't.
That's great.
Like, even when you watch sports, do you watch it the minute it starts?
I do. That's the way to consume sports. Watching a replay of it's way different.
Says the man who's about to drive 9 hours to watch a game live.
Only $1,000 ticket too.
Okay, so anyway, the point is you're absolutely right about the cord cutters. It's the same demographic, and it happens to be the demographic that advertisers want to spend money against, right? So it's a little self-fulfilling.
Yeah. I was saying, looks like you got a question coming. Yeah.
So, kind of like me, I may be one of the older guys in the room. I'm not going to say how much it is, but just like that gentleman, I've seen quite a bit of technology go through. And one question I have is really academia sponsorship. All right, so let's take the University of Michigan, where the football budget is massive.
Mm-hmm.
Where do you see the real entry point? Do you see it in major colleges starting to invest in this type of thing, or do you think the private sector?
Entry point for who?
Yeah, so in other words, sports, there's college sports, right? So there's a lot of investment, a lot of time, sponsorships, that sort of thing come through. And that normally feeds the professional ranks, right? So I guess my question is, let's take a Rutgers or University of Michigan. How are these colleges, are these colleges ever going to be interested to the point where they're going to throw massive amounts of dollars, like they do in college sports, into something like this? And if they do, when do you think that entry point, is it already happened? And if so, where do you see that eventually feeding into?
So it's already
interesting.
happening.
Right.
There's an organization called NACE, the NACE.
NACE, yeah.
National Association of Collegiate Esports. 32 schools have signed up, offering sponsorships, full sponsorships, forming teams, forming leagues that are playing amongst, whether it's regional, mid-Atlantic, or whatever, or Midwest, or whatever. So it's happening. The danger is when you use words like massive. It's like, how long will it take before it matches the likes of the money that's spent on college basketball or football? That's decades, right? Like it's to me, it's a generational change. There's a lot of things. It cannot happen quickly. The most interesting thing for me, as somebody who's talked to people about esports, who comes from the traditional games industry, which is where I come from, things tend to happen quickly. You can write a product, have it up on a digital outlet like Steam, and have 1 million people playing it in no time at all and watching it on Twitch, right? As soon as you start to actually formalize it and put it in stadiums and stream it to a schedule, then real world realities kick in, like, well, we need to book the stadium. And the stadium guy goes, well, I got a choice. Most of my nights are booked by the pro teams that I've got scheduled for the next 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, or I can let Katy Perry come and perform one night. How are you doing? Right? And it's a really practical, like, who do they put in the stadium? Because stadiums are butts in seats businesses. They make their money from selling popcorn, beer, soda, parking. Oh, and by the way, you bought a ticket, right? I think the average cost for a person to go to a basketball game is something like $250, ignoring what he's paying this weekend. And, but most of that is not the ticket, it's everything else. It's like running a bar. The high margin business is not necessarily the stuff that gets people in the door, right? So you don't. But there is something about, so who has been to a live esports event? Okay, so about 50-50. And you've been, what did you go see?
going to, I ran a now defunct CEX in Las Vegas, 2003,
How many people were there?
10,000.
That's awesome. Okay, 3,000 people turned up at the MGM here a few weeks ago for the Rocket League World Championship. Okay? And if you've not been to a live esports event, it's like not going to a live concert or not going to a live a sporting event, you know? He could watch the game he's going to see on Monday, but he's going to go with his buddies, you know, perhaps partake of some adult beverages.
No,
and
never.
then,
Never.
you know, watch a
No.
game. Okay, so there isn't a need for it, but I think that like any like there's a cycle here, right? There's a virtuous cycle. There's an excitement of going to a game that makes for better TV. You know, watching a comedy without a laugh track just isn't that interesting, right? It kind of falls flat. That's
Strange.
why they have
Yeah,
them,
it'd be weird.
right? So it's a little like watching a live sporting event without a crowd. You know, so there's something about the entertainment value of having a crowd, and that's why people go to live events, and then the TV broadcaster or the streamer likes that because it just feels more exciting, and you want to be there, and it makes for better TV. So, anyway.
Yeah, that's...
We'll keep going through
Yeah,
our slides.
and the in-stadium experience, football's doing the same thing. Roger Goodell, commissioner of the NFL, hates HD TVs because why do I need to go to a game where it's crystal clear on my couch? There's something about the in-stadium experience you can't get at home, and that's what he's trying to capitalize on. And it's a different stream of revenue doing the ticket sales, so it's also bringing in more money. For the college side of things, yes, as Eugene said, it's already in colleges. You got the ULOL, you've got Collegiate Star League, you got NACE. There are some schools offering scholarships now. It won't ever. I don't know if it'll ever get to where we have the NFL, or sorry, college football and college men's basketball, but it might get to where we have college swimming and diving and investing that much money. You know, there's I think 30 or 35 different championship sports that are sponsored by this bad word, the NCAA. Now, I don't think esports wants the NCAA to get involved. I've argued against that already because that changes the way that people compete in college. Because then you can't go and make money on the side competing in esports because then you're making money off of what you do. Football players can't do it. Basketball players can't do it. So I think getting the NCAA involved could hurt. And I don't want to see them involved, but they're looking at it. In October, they met and they said, we need to know more information about esports to see if we want to get involved or not. But if there's money to be made, I think they're going to eventually get involved with it. Okay, and I saw a couple other questions. Yeah.
Just that, as far as the in-person event stuff, also I think it's, people want to come and be with the community. That's something else, like that's why I get up and come to these things. I could sit at home and like party my life away. I want to be here with the people that have all the same interests or rooting for the same team. It's just that sense of community and everyone coming together. And I can see that with events like this or going to DreamHack or doing our own events. People come and see each other to build a community.
Totally.
Yeah, that's a great response. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess I'm trying to get back to what you're talking about, the added laugh tracks, if that's what the majority of people like. I mean, what if you don't like that? Does that mean that, like, to go back to the thing with the in-crowd things and that? Because, I mean, I would prefer to see it online because, I mean, why am I going to pay money and spend all that money? So it's like, does that mean I'm, like, antisocial? Like, what does that mean? Is that,
I'm not going to judge. I mean, the good thing is, well, hopefully we have choices, right? Look, it's a business, or it's going to be a business, and it is a business. So the business is about maximizing revenue. And if the majority of people like watching, primetime Thursday night comedies with a laugh track, guess what's on Thursday nights on prime time? So we'll do what works. What's interesting about what's going on right now is we're trying to figure out what works.
Right.
So there's no preordained answer that what might works from now. It's hard to say what TV itself will look like in 5 years. It's hard to say what live events will look like in 5 years. Events like this are relatively new, let's face it, right? There's something about, I've watched PAX explode. How long has MAGFest been running?
It's about 11, 12 years.
Okay, in the scheme
15?
of things, that's not that long, right? Like the whole cosplay scene, that's why esports arguably really started to take off in the late 90s in primarily Korea, right? It's not that long ago in the scheme of
No,
things.
no. I mean, NFL's been around for 100 years, baseball 150 years.
Yeah, but the reality is that most of what we're talking about here in terms of the coverage of sports has only been true in the last 40 years.
Yeah.
Right? It was the emergence of cable and an absolute need to fill all of these channels that means that we have HGTV and all these shows that apparently none of you ever watch anyway, that they needed to fill it. And so suddenly broadcasting sports became valuable and it started to change the game, right? That was
Literally.
the interesting thing is now when you have timeouts during basketball because they need to run an ad, that's, if anything, that's the bit I go, really, does that have to happen? And now I think people will start to think in terms of esports and how viewable they are, right?
Yeah.
It's actually really hard to broadcast something like a PUBG game that runs for as long as it did, right? It's really hard to show that live because there's so much going on. But some of the best coverage of esports was when I think the CW channel ran a PUBG event. No, it wasn't a PUBG event. It was a H1Z1 event that was live to tape. Right? So they didn't try and do it live. They recorded the entire thing and the points of view of all, whatever it was, 128 participants, and then they went away and edited it down to something like 90 minutes, and it's great viewing. Who watched that? Did anybody see that? It's great viewing, right? Because they have the segues to the background on the players. They have those moments of tension when everybody collides and they know somebody's coming over the hill and they don't know, right? But the only way you captured that was in the editing room.
Right.
Doing that live
Right.
is super hard.
Also what they did with Halo back in the early MLG days, they didn't make it as publicly known, but they had a 3-day buffer for when they recorded all the local Xboxes, and then that's why the production quality was so good when MLG first came to television.
Yeah. So even the very nature of how we watch and what it is and how it's programmed and even how the games work will change. Rocket League works great because it's 3 or 4 minute matches, and it's like really sudden bursts
Right.
of energy.
Yeah.
I sat, and I never thought I would do this. My son, 11, huge fan of Rocket League, loves to play. I got tickets. I watched 6 hours of Rocket League with him. 6 hours. It was awesome, and I didn't drink a single beer. So
Wow, I can't go 6 hours doing anything without drinking a beer. Jeez. Again, other things we're going to mention, esports is an umbrella term, right? There's a lot of different parts. A lot of people don't like the term esports, as Eugene kind of mentioned earlier. It's that umbrella term because there's a lot of different genres that fall under the term esports. So because you have an esports team, you're like, well, okay, that can mean a lot of different things. You could have first-person shooters, you could have sports games, you could have the MOBAs, the fighting games, the RTS, the Rocket League, whatever you want to call that one. I don't know, sports, indie game. I don't know what genre you want to put that one in. And then you got good old Hearthstone, which I don't consider to be a sport because there's a lot more luck involved and the physical aspect isn't there because you play your cards faster, unless you're playing that card that makes it only 15 seconds instead of 30 seconds, whatever one that is. There's really no component of physicality that has a direct impact on the outcome. You can make an argument and that's fine. But people need to understand what genres are out there, which ones are popular. In the US, we love our first-person shooters. We love our violence. In Korea, it always started with the RTSs and StarCraft, and the MOBAs obviously were very popular there. Around the world, MOBAs are extremely popular. The sports games, the NBA is starting to have an NBA 2K team associated with their actual NBA team now. So all these sports leagues are starting to pick up on these sports games that are out there. Some places like Evo have been around for a long time doing the fighting games. We got all these different genres, and not everybody likes all these genres or even understands them. Trying to explain a MOBA to somebody who has no idea what a MOBA is really painful.
who's excited here about 2K League and having NBA esport teams?
Sorry.
What about Madden? What about FIFA?
So FIFA's more than anything else, it looks like.
Okay, well, that's interesting. I've argued that it's going to struggle, like the whole notion of sports as an esport, and I think it's partly because of the audience. Yeah.
So, this is only a small sample size of what was like this test, in my personal experience, but I found that if there's a degree of push So those who like League of Legends, Counter-Strike, like Dota 2, those people, including myself, and then to the FIFA, 2K, like sports gaming, because it sort of seemed like it's a co-option of the medium from something that was traditionally there. So this is just for nerds, where more more traditional sports didn't really have bearing. People who were out of the know were really in it. But when you're bringing in FIFA, when you're bringing in 2K games that are extremely popular, that are produced every single year, have a very large, more general audience, a specialized audience, like something like ball. It's there's some resistance to that. People try and
Sure, and it's not unlike every medium that's ever existed that grows up as a grassroots and then it becomes mainstream and everybody gets upset about it.
They're selling out to the man.
And-
Yeah.
Right, selling out to the man. What's that?
Madden was on ESPN.
The Madden bus was going around for a long time.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. There's room for all of them, and but I think they're going to struggle just because I'm not sure that it translates in the same way. And it's going to be super interesting to watch. And look at this, in this room, hardly any hands went up. Now, given the nature of the event and the audience, it's not surprising. But,
Right.
FIFA is one of the most popular games in the world. And it makes EA a lot of money. It also costs them a lot of money that they have to pay FIFA and all the players and everybody involved to make it happen. But I think you had another question.
Yeah, so I think sports teams, maybe for the national level, certainly getting global players together, I think that's maybe where it is, right? So where you want to play a game, but there's geological constraints in getting people to place. So that might be an area where maybe our games go from a regional aspect. So for example, soccer, football, European football is a global type of sport. So
Right.
maybe that's where that would now start.
So that raises a really interesting question that was something we've debated about the
Not
value
argued, debated.
that's right. About the value of regional teams versus virtual teams, right? Because it goes back to this live question. If it's virtual teams, then you're not necessarily going to go to a stadium to watch them because you may not be able to get there.
While you're saying
a good
teams, I
segue
thought I'd go to that,
teams.
yeah.
But, all the teams in the bottom left, are those the Overwatch?
Those are the Overwatch.
Okay, so the team logos in the bottom left are all the Overwatch ones. I didn't recognize some of them. And, they're named after cities. London has the London in there.
Spitfire.
Yeah, hey, Battle of Britain. So the point is, they took something which was a global phenomenon and it didn't have to happen locally. Right? And ironically, unlike the music business, for example, where a particular music scene might emerge in a region, and then sell out nationally,
That's where my industry is.
Yeah. So, but what's happening here is we've actually seen it go the other way, where they want it regional because one of the ways they think they can make it work is to bring people to stadiums, to make money out of the buying sodas and beers and hot dogs, right, and get those local sponsorships. Local sponsorship is still hugely important to the sports business.
I think it'll be able to accommodate both. I think
Yep.
one thing in my generation is that we did think regionally on an economic scale. Not saying that's good or bad, not saying we don't have global corporations. We do. But I think the size and speed, especially in the music industry now, where 10, 25 years ago, it took $30,000 to produce an album. Right? You had to go to the studio, had to get time, had to go to the record company and basically sell your soul on a contract or to get anything out and then spend the next 5 years paying for it. Now I can download something for $4,000 on the end, go all over the world and basically be a direct distributor, right? So the idea is, what happens in music similarly might be happening here is that there's probably going to be both. Just because I can put something on the internet doesn't mean that I'm not going to go and see a local band down the street, right? If I think it's good, it's going to be worth it, I'm going to go ahead and do it.
Right.
I think the idea is that with ad choice, rather than say it's either going to be this or that, why can't it be?
Things are really black and white, right? And it's a matter of a moment in time. And as we all look, the gentleman here is here with his son, right?
Nephew, yeah.
Nephew, okay. So you had to borrow a kid to get in here? Is that how it worked? Okay. So, how you doing? So, But it becomes a generational thing, right? People follow the team that either they went to college with or that their father or mother
parents, yeah.
supported. You know, it's a generational thing. We haven't been doing this long enough for that to even happen. A lot of the brands weren't even associated with, these were more in my mind like organizations. Here in DC, we have Monumental that owns several teams. That's more like Team Liquid, Evil Genius. But what Overwatch did, which I thought was super smart, was to say, we need the team brands to reflect the team for that sport. So this is the Overwatch team for London, for Detroit, for Dallas, whatever they are, okay? And that is, I think that is a really important thing to put in place for this to work for over the next 10, 20, 30 years. Because that's the other thing that's really different about what they're doing with esports versus what happened in video games. Video games came and went after a year or two, right? And esports is one of the things that's changing that. I have a different view on it because I used to run MMOs that ran forever. You know, a couple of months ago, I went to the 20th anniversary of the launch of Ultima Online. You know, 20 years people have been playing that one game. That's insane, but that's something that was unique to MMOs.
Yeah. Let's go here and then back here.
Do you feel like, for the Overwatch League especially, like I was looking, I'm from New York, I see the New York lineup, and I'm just like, whoa, that's an entirely Korean team.
Right.
Do you feel like there's any research that can show that, you know, Americans from a region are more interested in seeing like people that either speak their language or are from
They can associate with a lot easier, maybe?
or, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the reality is everybody wants to compete and win. So what did they do when there was no rules in place about where you got your players
Yeah,
from?
you get the best
They
of the
went to
best.
the best in the world.
Yeah.
Now, there's a couple of interesting things about that. One is League of Legends actually put in place a whole bunch of rules to try to restrict that because they wanted regional popular players to emerge and for aspiring players to believe they could get to that level. The Koreans happen to be really good because they've been taking it seriously for 20 years, right? I mean, I've been over there a few times. Until you see it, the first time I went over there, I asked somebody, show me one of these PC bongs, you know, even the way they play. They don't play at home, they play at cafes. Asian homes are too small for most teenagers to have a bedroom that they can lock themselves in and be and play video games all day long, right? So what do? They go to these gaming cafes, right? They're not drinking, they might be smoking, but they're going to these gaming cafes. And I said to somebody the first time I went over there, I want to see one of these things. Can you show me a couple of these places? And they said, sure. And they looked at me kind of like, really? Like, why is this a big deal? And after I think they'd shown me the 13th one within 2 city blocks, I got the point. There were 35,000 of them in Seoul at that time. Okay, so it's hard to get your head around how much. You can buy a book, Learning English with StarCraft, right? Like it was a cultural thing where if you were a teenager, especially a male, but as equal in many cases, a female in Korea, you played these games. You know, so they got really good at it. So there's two things about that. One, rules have been tried to put in place so you get those to emerge. Two, some of the games like Rocket League, the Europeans kick everybody's ass at Rocket League. That's where a lot of the best players are. You know, and it was just when they picked up on it first, maybe because it's fundamentally seen as a football game. But time will change that.
But initially, do you think there's going to be more money to be made by, I don't know, if there was like a whole stack of celebrities on a team? They might not win most of the games, but they might get the most engagement from their team.
Well, hopefully it doesn't become WWE.
Right. You want a balance.
We want it to be actual players, not people that are there because they're funny.
Yeah.
Or because they can entertain us. But at the same time, I think one thing that has to change is, you know, some of these players could do with some help in their, camera presence, shall we call it, and some training. there was that great moment, which even got, the fact that this even happened got picked up on one of the late night shows where the guy kind of fumbled his handshake when he was accepting his prize at the end. And it was really an unfortunate, stupid moment, but it was like, we need more personalities in it so that it does actually become entertaining and a little more mainstream and attractive, while hopefully not selling out.
Right. I know. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I just have a quick question about, I don't know, just quick, with VR and AR, like, it's being early adopted in 2019, 2020, and like me, growing up with World of Warcraft and MMOs, like, I see AR as the next platform for the next MMO, like, be the next Mark Zuckerberg. Like, I just want to get both of your guys' thoughts on AR.
VR is the future, and it always will be.
You don't think AR is going to overtake that?
No, okay, so who has a VR headset? Who used it in the last 30 days? Okay. All right, so when I hear pitches from startups all the time, and you got people who come along and go, well, we want to do eSports, but as VR. And it's like, okay, you want to take two emerging things that are hard enough to get right on their own, and now actually add them together. And the guys that turn up and say, and it all runs on the blockchain. And it's like, okay, we're done, we're finished, okay? So, I'm glad some of you at least got that. So, it's great, but until every hand in this room goes up and says, I have a VR headset, or AR is phenomenal, it's amazing, the demos are astonishing, but we're in the magic stage, right? The magic stage is when we haven't seen it before, and even the stupidest demo makes us go, oh my God, that's amazing, right? But it doesn't make you want to do it every day, right? Pokemon isn't AR, but it was the closest thing to getting everybody to do that every day. So it'll be there, but if you're trying to start a career in esports, that's not going to help you, okay? And if anything, it's going to hinder you. Let's try and make it work with what everybody can do today.
Interesting.
So when you're talking about the teams up there and how each team is represented, especially in Overwatch, just in the region, I feel, from my background with esports, is pretty much Dota 2, almost exclusively, and I think the scene is absolutely the antithesis of everything we've been talking about, and it still works. Because players, there's a big roster shuffle after every international, which is the championship. Every single year, like a bunch of players, regardless of team identity, will be shuffled around. And while there are a few mainstays of certain teams, the vast majority of players will just go and form new squads, pick up with different boards. So the Fnatic last year is nothing like the Fnatic this year because they have players from Canada and Europe as well, but it's an SCA-based organization in Dota. So they're running out of Manila, while there's a team called Team Secret, and that's pretty much a different nationality with every single player. They've got players from Eastern Europe, Western Europe, Jordan. So it's extremely interesting because you don't have sort of consistency in your brand identity, except for like maybe one, maximum two players on any given team.
So do you think that helps it or hurts it?
What I've noticed is that, so there are some people who are like OEG, Team Liquid, and China as a very separate scene, but they're also huge because we don't really, in the West, get much out of China because they're just living in their own microcosm, and we just occasionally get some tricks, some data, or some memes or whatever, just trickle feed into us via Reddit. But because that scene is so insulated with a lot of that, and they don't really go to a Western organization. But because you have all these players shuffling, now people are like, oh, like I'm an Eternal Envy fan, popular player, or I'm an Arteezy fan, and so I go where that player goes.
Yeah, it's like the LeBron James effect, Right. People are the fans of where LeBron James goes. They were Cavs fans and they were Heat fans when he was there, and now they're back to being Cavs fans. So there are some instances where, yeah, people will follow fans, but the bigger fan attachment, this is what research says, the bigger fan attachment goes to teams. Because that team, that brand lasts for a very, very long time through time, where a player will eventually retire and do something else, and they got to do another attachment. So brand recognition through teams is much stronger to a fan than an individual is, even though it works for now, and that's great. I'm not saying it's never going to work for them. Of course, different things work for different people,
And
or
it's
and
gonna
different organizations.
It's going to take tens or hundreds of millions of dollars for some of these sports to emerge and grow and so on. And the people who are doing that are sitting there going, how do I make this work for the next 10, 20 years? Because that's how they think, you know? When the NFL signs a deal with whoever's carrying the NFL right now, those are 8-year deals, right? They're not a year deals, they're not 2-year deals. And those players, the roster of those teams are not going to be the same in 8 years, right? They're just not. So that's why what Overwatch did with all these brands and these regional specific logos is they're starting to say, we have to make it about this. Now, of course, there'll be players on the teams like LeBron or, you know, when I first moved to the U.S., it was during Jordan's era with the Bulls, you know. And, you know, there are defining moments, but the danger of that is what, you know, look at the teams that are based on individuals, you know, thinking about golf, thinking about tennis, where you get stars that emerge that pull attention that might not have otherwise been there. Look at what Tiger Woods did for golf, right? And then look at what Tiger Woods did for golf. So, you know, that can go both ways.
Yeah.
The roster swap situation, to answer your question, I think it almost stunts the legitimacy or the professionalism that players take. Because so we do some Call of Duty, we're learning more and more about Call of Duty, and it seems that the fact that they can drop their org or their team and find a new one right then, like 20 minutes later, and hop into the next tournament, it kind of removes that sense of commitment. And
there's no skin in the game.
Yep.
So it's just, and particularly at a lower AM level, there isn't like the infrastructure yet, as far as like, oh, we have a high school team, so everyone plays in the high school
Right.
team, and you're kind of like on the hook for that. Whereas this, it's just like, oh, we had a bad round, I'm done, see you later. So, and you also have boards that just, you know.
There's been a lot of headlines about how much it costs to start an Overwatch team, right? They've talked about 10 million, 20 million. It wasn't really ever confirmed. The point was not the amount of money, because we don't even know over what period of time that was. And let's face it, the people who signed up and did that, it's probably less than any of the contracts they signed with most of their players for their pro teams, right? So for them, it's not a lot of money. What it really was about was commitment, right? Because the last thing somebody like Activision wants with Overwatch League, or the last thing Riot wants when they start their league, is for somebody who gets behind, you know, especially some of these big, incredibly powerful sports figures that are out there backing some of these teams, for them a year from now to go, yeah, you know what, didn't work, okay? And they pull out, because that seeds doubt with all the sponsors, that seeds doubt with all of the other, what they were doing was saying, we're making a commitment to this. Because how old is Overwatch now?
Year and a half.
A year and a half?
Yeah.
Okay, it's still not proven, right? And there's plenty of, I mean, the worst thing about esports is there's a single developer defining the rules.
Right.
And they can change the rules anytime. And they've all learned some really bad mistakes, like changing some of the game mechanics 2 weeks before a final. You know, and it's like you can't do that if you're going to take the idea seriously that players are going to learn the way a game plays, develop the muscle memory, and everything. And then if you come along and change that, you know, it would be like changing the rules around a traditional sport a week before.
Right.
It just would never happen.
I played baseball my entire life up through college, and one thing is baseball has been the same game however many years.
Mostly the same game.
Yeah, mostly the same
Yeah.
game. Like, there's the asterisk period moving forward.
Right.
They moved, their big thing a couple years ago was they reduced the size of the strike zone off.
Right.
On top of it. That was a big to-do. But for the most part, mechanically, pitchers all go do the same thing.
For the last 150 years, it's been pretty much the same.
No, you don't want it to be too extreme, but and a lot of the changes are about making it exciting to watch, right? So a few years ago, NASCAR completely changed the way in which the final few races of the season are run.
Yep.
And they were trying to make it so that it wasn't, 5 games before or 5 races before the end of the season. It's like, well, he's clearly won. Like, we're done. It's a point system.
Yeah.
And so they reset the way that worked to bring a little more tension into it. So there's things that can be improved. You've been waiting patiently.
Thanks. So this kind of goes into my question about change, but one game in particular that is like never going to change is Super Smash Bros. Melee.
Never gonna change. Okay, that's on tape. Tape. Look at me. That's recorded.
So that goes into my question. Like, why do you think Nintendo is like so? I don't want to say ignorant, but like supporting this scene because they just don't act like it exists. But all the players are there and all the tournaments are there.
Nintendo is such an interesting, unique
Yes,
company that I would never bet against. Right? Like why are they successful? Because they don't do anything that anybody ever expects. Their online presence with any of their devices is still minimal and questionable, but it doesn't stop them having some of the greatest and most significant brands and games in the business. And who bought a Switch? And a
can
year
find
ago or so, people were like, Nintendo's dead,
Yeah.
They were kind of done. Never write them off. So I don't know. They just I think it's a lot to do with the Japanese culture, and at the end of the day, the fact that is a company run out of Kyoto. No, I think so. And it has a ton to do with that.
Right.
But it's also the great thing about esports, right? That games that the developers could never have conceived of as an esport. In fact, there's an argument you can't make an esport, right? I hear that over and over again. It's about the fact that the community adopts it. Now, I would argue there's lots of things you can do to give it a greater chance, but at the end of the day, it's about the adoption. And we're seeing them do some things, but they don't embrace it, not to the same extent as other people. And that might change.
Yeah, I think so too. Let's get we got about 2 minutes left. I do want to mention a couple quick things, and then we'll get to some more questions, and we'll stick around for a little bit and answer a couple of things. Here are some schools where you can currently study esport management. 3 here in the U.S., the top 3, Shenandoah, my first class will be next fall. Ohio, their first class will actually be this spring. And University of South Carolina has done one class before, and they're doing the second one, I believe, this spring. It is a grad and undergrad level, split level class. And then Staffordshire University in England actually has a program for studying esports, not the development of, but the management of esports. So those are some areas. So if you want to take some esport classes, come to SU. Why study it? Because it's fun. To take esports to the next level, we need people trained in how to manage and run esporting events. And experience is the best way to do it. We get them running it in the classroom and outside the classroom to get them that experience. And then there are jobs out there. There are a ton of jobs. Okay, somebody in this room has that job at Geico right now. Marketing coordinator to help guide Geico sponsored investment in the esports scene. That's a brand new job that didn't exist 2 years ago. More and more companies are getting invested into having these positions on their staff to get into the esports scene.
The day that they announced the Overwatch League, Blizzard listed something like 36 jobs that opened up as a result.
Yeah, and look at Blizzard down at the bottom. You probably can't read that number. I did a quick job search. There are 249 openings at Blizzard right now in esports. Okay, that's in the esports side, not Blizzard in general, but the esports side of things at Blizzard. And then the Esports Observer, which is a free subscription to have. It gets blasted to your inbox, I think, once a week. They are actually partners with the Sport Business Journal and Sport Business Daily. They frequently have career openings and jobs in esports, and it's something that's constant. I get a lot of my information from the Esports Observer. I don't work for them, but there's a plug for them right there. So if you can, just look them up and subscribe to them, and they'll just shoot you an email once a week, and it's really, really good stuff if you want to work in and keep abreast of the esport industry. Okay, so that is all the slides I have. Let's have one more question before we wrap things up. You were first.
So I'm a parent with my kids. One of them. So we're at home. We're streaming. We've casted. We've working on some local tournament organizing. We did Valhalla's the World Championship. So we've met developers. We've had some experience. But we're getting experience firsthand without having to step into a classroom. What's the motivation to go in the classroom for this versus what we can do online and within our community?
Well, it sounds like, do they want to compete? Do you want to compete?
He's looked at those.
Or just work in it, manage it, help run the business side
if
of
you want to
it.
compete, then he probably can't do much for you, right?
Right.
Like,
Well, see, the idea is you shoot for competing, and when you inevitably miss, then you fall.
You can cast it, you
this
can
is
manage
the-
it, and do
This
other
is
things.
the,
Right.
you better get a degree for
Right,
when
Reza?
you break your leg or, yeah. Talk to him. Seriously.
No, so the learning things in the classroom, it is getting to, it's about a whole education. It's a well-rounded education. It's not just an esports education. It's how to think critically in any situation as well. I tell that to sport management people all the time. They can learn anything about football by going to the NFL combines and these other things, but being in the classroom, they're around other like-minded people for a long time and can make mistakes in the classroom you can't make in the real world and still survive.
And we're actually, what I love about what Joey's doing is the class is going to be make an event.
Yep,
and
it's
put it
very,
on.
very practical, experientially
And
based.
In each year, it's going to get more involved.
Yep.
We've talked about whether we can actually get a Mid-Atlantic thing going on, so that'll help scale the whole thing. So you can try and do that on your own, or you could get involved in a school that's trying to actually make it happen at that level.
Yeah, and that's all we got time for. So thank you all very much for being here. We'll stick around for a little bit to answer some questions if you'd like to talk a little bit more. Thank you all.
Thanks, guys.